I've always wanted to act with Amy Brabson. So when I saw the movie Avatar last month, I thought, wow, what great sermon fodder. That's the sort of thing that I approach things with. It was packed with great theological underpinnings, and I was eager to unpack them. So I put this idea into the sermon queue for this morning, which would be the earliest time that I could get to it. And then when I learned a couple of weeks later that it had been nominated as the Best Picture for the Academy Awards, I thought, wow, I am going to be more timely than maybe I've been in decades. And then you can imagine my disappointment when it didn't win the Best Picture Oscar. So maybe this is a little less relevant than it might have otherwise been, but it is still in the ballpark, and it is still in the box office. So I don't go to the movies all that often these days. Actually, going to the cinema seems to be something that happens in spurts and drags, and so I was really glad that I had the opportunity to go and see Avatar on the big screen. I enjoyed the 3D and the very cool 3D glasses that they gave us to watch through. And I enjoyed the movie incredibly, at least most of it. But before I get into that, I want to share a plot synopsis of it with you so that those of you who might not have seen it will be able to follow along. I'm curious, how many people here have seen Avatar? So a good number. If you haven't seen it and you're afraid that I might spoil the plot, I'm afraid that that's not possible. I wish that it were possible to spoil the plot, but I don't believe that it is. The movie Avatar is about as predictable as was the plot of James Cameron's Titanic. Nobody went to the theater thinking, this time. Somehow, this time. So I hope that this isn't a spoiler for anyone. And the summary that I'm about to give you from the movie Avatar is mostly of my own recollections, but my memory has been helped by a couple of websites that I found online. So, Avatar is an American science fiction epic, written by and directed by James Cameron. It's set in the future year of 2154. Humans have traveled halfway across the universe to mine a precious mineral called unobtainium on Pandora, a lush moon of a gas giant in the Alpha Centauri star system. Expansion of their mining colony threatens the continued existence of a local tribe of Na'vi, a sentient humanoid-like species indigenous to Pandora. Jake Sully is a combat marine who had been injured in battle and who is now paraplegic, and the Veterans Administration doesn't have enough money to do the surgery that it would require to repair his legs, so he's stuck in a wheelchair. And then after his identical twin brother is killed in a robbery attempt, Jake takes his place on this project going to Pandora. Earthlings desperately need the rare mineral, unobtainium, found there in order to solve the energy crisis. Pandora is a hostile environment for humans. The air is toxic and the wilderness is filled with prehistoric-like savage beasts, and scientists have taken DNA from the indigenous Na'vi and combined it with DNA from the humans, and they have formed avatars. How many of you know what an avatar is? Okay, so this is my idea of what an avatar is. An avatar is a projection of someone's human life into an alternative body. So people have avatars on websites and things like that, and it's a projection of the human personality into this other life and way of being. And in the movie, it was a projection into these Na'vi-like creatures that were then inspirited by the humans who were sleeping back at the base. The humans, in their quest for unobtainium, can then move about in the hostile surroundings using their alter ego avatars. Well, Jake is taken in by the evil Colonel Courtrich to infiltrate the Na'vi in exchange for an operation that would restore his legs. Jake agrees, but soon finds himself indebted to a beautiful member of the Na'vi tribe. Oh, yes. Her name is Neytiri, and she saves his life after Jake is separated from his work crew on an expedition. She takes him back to the home tree, which is the massive center, both politically, socially, spiritually, and physically, the massive center of the Na'vi people. To her great disappointment, Neytiri is directed by her mother, who just happens to be the spiritual leader of the Na'vis, and she is forced by her mother to educate Jake to the ways of the Na'vi. And he is soon adopted into the group. And as he begins to learn the Na'vi ways, his outlook begins to change. Under Neytiri's tutelage, it takes little time before Jake begins to fall in love with her, and it takes even longer, of course, for her to be able to reciprocate that warmth. The kind of standard stuff of movies. Jake wants to remain in his avatar persona, where he has, including in his legs, far more than the normal range of human motion and strength. Eventually, he wants to protect the Na'vi from the annihilation that the Colonel has planned. He learns of their incredible connection and devotion to the environment and to its spirit named Ewa, which is somewhat personified by the home tree and the tree of voices and the tree of souls. And Jake learns how to plug in to the connections. Those of you who have seen it know what I'm saying. Jake has learned how to plug into these connections. Not only with the planet itself and the vegetation on it, but with the wildlife. In fact, there are neurological receptors that provide direct linkage between the Na'vi and many of the larger animals, as well as the planet. Well, finally it comes to crunch time, when the humans show up with the mega dozers to begin to destroy the trees and everything else between them and the unobtainium. The climax of the plot is a traditional epic battle between good and evil. The Na'vi fight against almost insurmountable odds in an effort to protect their homeland and their culture. I leave the outcome of that battle to those of you who have seen it in your memory, and I leave it to your imagination for those of you who have not yet seen it. The scenery in the movie is spectacular, with mountains, waterfalls, jungle foliage, interspersed with fantastical plants and creatures that can do all sorts of acrobatics and different kinds of feats. Even if you don't especially care for science fiction or fantasy, it's an amazing movie. The 3D is far more realistic than any previous attempts in that particular technology, and at times you might find yourself ducking from projectiles that are coming at you, or reaching out to catch a leaf that's falling from a tree, or maybe reaching out to catch or touch a feathery atokirina, the seeds of the great tree that fall at different times. I'm not saying that this is a must-see movie. I'm just saying that I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to see it. The entire movie was packed with theological underpinnings. The first 3/4 to 4/5 of the movie is filled with values that I think most of us would embrace. Some of the more salient principles that we might find attractive include the refusal of Jake to throw in the towel after he'd lost use of his legs. This was no easy thing for a strapping macho Marine for whom physical strength had been every bit as important as cunning in his earlier life. And then there was his exuberant joy that came as a result of his awe when in his avatar body he was able to regain the use of those legs. In Unitarian Universalism, we talk about affirming and promoting the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. The Novi world, which was based in the home tree, stretching out through a neuron-like pattern throughout the planet, was a wonderful visualization of that interdependent web. Through the use of lighting, you could see all of those interdependent connections on the screen. It did not only include plant life and vegetation, it included all the wildlife of Pandora, and it provided a